Well, it didn't seem possible after Notre Dame's loss in Northern Illinois, but right now Notre Dame has a clear path to the college football playoff, and they might even be able to host a playoff game. So how can Notre Dame avoid an upset against Navy and keep their playoff hopes alive? That's next on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I'm pumped to have you here on this Thursday, October 24th. And thanks as always for making this your first listen of the day. This show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are watching along, remember, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe on your preferred platform. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Quick programming note, this is your last call for mailbag questions. I'm going to be here tomorrow morning doing the Friday mailbag, as we do every Friday during the season. And I even posed a prompt on social media. I would like to hear what you think about the Navy series. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you pretty indifferent? I feel like a lot of Notre Dame fans have strong opinions about the Navy series, and I'm excited to hear yours, and I'll give mine tomorrow. But as for today, we have a new guest on the show, Joe George, who is a radio host down in Houston, but was born and raised in Illinois, big Chicago sports fan. He is going to be the new host of the Locked On Chicago postcasts, which are what they sound like, podcasts right after a game. They're post-game shows, and he is going to be doing a postcast for every Notre Dame football game going forward here. And you can find his episodes on the audio feed and also the Locked On Chicago YouTube page. We talk about it more in depth on the show, and we talk about Notre Dame's upcoming matchup against Navy and their college football playoff hopes. I had a great time talking with Joe. I hope you enjoy it. All right, I'm joined now by Joe George, the co-host of Gullent and George on ESPN Radio 97.5 and the new host of the Locked On Chicago postcast for us here at the Locked On Podcast Network. So right off the top, Joe, please tell us about your new role and what it is that you'll be doing as it pertains to Notre Dame football coverage.
Yeah, so on the Locked On Chicago YouTube channel, we just started it, so subscribe when you can. It's brand spanking new. We'll be doing post-game shows for about 30 minutes for Notre Dame football, the Chicago Bears, the Cubs, and the Bulls. So going 30 minutes, as soon as, and we're going to go live as soon as the game ends. So like as soon as this weekend's Notre Dame game wraps up, we'll do a postcast for Locked On Irish, and the audio will be available on the same channel, but the YouTube channel will be a little bit different.
What's your connection to Notre Dame?
Man, just growing up in Illinois, it's my dad. He was a huge Notre Dame fan. I don't think we have any family members that go to Notre Dame, so it's like a lot of Notre Dame fans. Like we don't really have. There's a lot of us in this fan base that we're not, lucky enough to go to the school. But just growing up, my friends, my dad, like I said specifically, is a huge Notre Dame fan. It's just something he kind of instilled in me, and it's been my go-to every Saturday for years now.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I was the first person in my family to actually go to Notre Dame, and there are some times where I'm like, man, I really wish my dad and uncle and grandpa did not pass this misery on down to me, but it was not miserable for them. They got to enjoy a lot of winning, a lot of success, and a lot of national championships so far. Not as many national championships in my lifetime, but Notre Dame has been winning quite a lot. So I do feel that we are fortunate, especially relative to some other fan bases, including some blue bloods out there. But let's talk about this season. What has been your impression of this team and really this season so far as a whole?
Man, it's been a fun season. Like obviously the NIU loss sucks, but so for me it started off. I drove out to College Station. And went to that first game, which was an incredible experience. Like I've been to a lot of Notre Dame games, but the SEC environment is a little bit different. So that was a really cool thing to go to and see Notre Dame get that win in College Station. But I think it's been a good season. Like I said, the NIU loss, I feel like it stings. Even as we try to get excited, you look at the schedule and it's like, well, Florida State's not anything like we thought they were going to be. USC's not really what we thought they were going to be. So a lot of that stuff I look at as it's frustrating, even though it's not Notre Dame's fault, but it's been a good season. I'm enjoying the Marcus Freeman run so far as the head coach, and Riley Leonard's been, he's been up and down. I don't know. How do you feel about Riley Leonard this year? Because I'm still not totally sure.
I think he is the reason that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois in a way, but I also think that more responsibility should be put on the coaching staff for not taking him out when he was clearly hurt. But yeah, he's definitely not as good as I thought he'd be as a passer. It's funny because when he was in the transfer portal and it became very clear that Notre Dame was going to pick him up, I was like, man, I don't know how he is as a passer. And then I kind of turned that around, and then I was all in on Riley Leonard when you heard all this great stuff about him in camp, and then things certainly took a turn. I'm like, okay, all my concerns about his throwing ability back, this time last year, back when Notre Dame was about to play Duke, all of that stuff turned out to be real. But I do think what he brings in the run game is especially important to this team, considering they are playing with 3 guys in the offensive line that they had no intentions of starting when this season got started. So I think he's a good fit for this offense. Definitely has to be more consistent as a thrower. But as we look ahead to this stretch run here, I think with Riley Leonard as quarterback, they should be able to finish 11-1. Not saying that they will, but they should. Do you basically agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. It's I don't know. It's like you said, like we've suffered a lot as Notre Dame fans. People that are probably close to our age, like have seen a lot of the ugly stuff. And Marcus Freeman obviously has Marshall and Stanford and NIU on his record as losses. So sometimes it feels like I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I look at their schedule and it's like, yeah, Army, Navy, USC, Florida State, like. This is a team that should finish 11-1 and hopefully make the college football playoff. Like that's what it's still the goal. It's still weird to figure out. Like I'm curious when that first television show that they do to release the rankings where Notre Dame will actually fit into it. Because it feels like they could go one of two ways to make Irish fans very happy and put them in, or to try to make them irate and leave them out of the first running of the playoff rankings. But I think they'll finish 11-1. I would be surprised, and that's no disrespect to what Navy and Army are doing this year, both being undefeated, but there's so much talent on this team still on the offensive side. Like when you look at the run game, they feel like they can pretty much do whatever they want a lot of times. So I'm still pretty confident that they'll run the table the rest of the way.
I hear you, and as I've talked about this week on the show, Marcus Freeman has never won more than 5 consecutive games as a head coach, and they have won 5, and they've got a big one this weekend going up against Navy. But as for this Navy game, right, like they're ranked now national media darling. Everyone loves Navy. I'm seeing a lot of people picking Navy this week, including Joel Klatt, who I work with, and they're picking them outright. They're not picking them just to cover. However, I feel like Notre Dame is not only going to win, I expect Notre Dame to cover in this game, and I am anticipating a pretty sizable shift in the conversation about Navy if Notre Dame goes out there and handles their business. Do you think the College Football Playoff Committee is going to do the same? Like, are they going to value this game if Notre Dame was able to go out on top?
Yes and no. I do think that the one thing with Riley Leonard and not being able to throw the ball is I do feel like Notre Dame lacks style points. And because of the loss to NIU, I do think some style points would help out a little bit. So a couple touchdown passes in this game, I think, would go a long way for the Irish in that playoff rankings. I don't know. When you get this, when we get these narratives painted about darlings, it just flips so quick as soon as they lose. As soon as Notre Dame wins this game by 14 plus points, we're all going to wake up on Monday and they're all going to say, "Oh, it's just Navy." It's no big deal. It's not a real win. It doesn't matter. It was a cute ranking, but it didn't actually mean anything. So sadly, I don't think it's going to help propel them into that top 12 and lock them in it, without that, the non-power 4 team that will probably overtake them in the rankings when we eventually do see it. But it should help because it's still going to be, hopefully 2 more top 25 wins on your resume at the end of the season. It should matter for something, but I just imagine on Monday that they'll try their best to flip the narrative against Notre Dame on this one for sure.
Yeah, but Notre Dame does have to take care of business first. We can't act like this is an automatic win because it's not. Navy could definitely upset this team if they do not come ready to play. But there is another game this weekend that is hugely important to Notre Dame in this season. Texas A&M plays LSU at home. That Texas A&M win for Notre Dame is the biggest key. It's the number one thing they have going on their resume right now. I did not expect Texas A&M to win every game after that game just because they did not look all that great, but credit to Mike Elko and the coaching staff over there for figuring some things out. Connor Wigman looks like a completely different player since he's returned from his injury. And now as they're ready to host Bayou Brian and the LSU Tigers, I feel like that game is going to go a long way in determining how everyone looks at Notre Dame's resume. So obviously we're all going to be watching Notre Dame Navy at noon, but how interested are you in that game with LSU and Texas A&M as it pertains to Notre Dame's playoff hopes?
Oh man, I mean it's that game's massive because that game feels like it could just flip the college football playoff on its head. Like A&M skyrockets into the top 12 if they win this game because they're at 14 right now. Well, if they move into the top 12, then Notre Dame should be in front of them. So it should be wherever A&M goes, Notre Dame should follow right there. Even though A&M does look like a totally different football team, I do give Mike Elko like a ton of credit for going back to Connor Wegman when he just knew like it was time to. It wasn't going to work out with the other quarterback, and going back to Connor is such a gutsy move for a coach to make in his first year. So that game is going to be a lot of fun to watch. But you're right, it's massive because if A&M, even if they lost to Texas in that last game of the season, in Austin, and they don't make the college football playoff, if they beat LSU on the way, and it kind of maybe that balances out the fact that Florida State's not good and that USC's not as good as we thought they would be, their first year in the Big Ten. So it's big. I can't wait. It should be a fun one, just a great football game in general. But man, I think we're all rooting for A&M this weekend for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to be rooting for Texas A&M regardless of the playoff resume because they feel so strongly about Brian Kelly. But now I actually feel like it's justified. They should be rooting hard as hell for Texas A&M to knock off LSU. And me and some of my buddies were talking about this week, like, even if LSU were to lose this game, if they're able to win out after that, there is a chance that Notre Dame and LSU could face off in the college football playoff. But that is a long way away. I want to get back to the Navy game here for a second because we've already talked about it a little bit and what this game means for the program. But when you look at this matchup, what is your biggest concern when the Irish face the Midshipmen?
I mean, obviously, they run the ball really well. It is weird to look at Navy and look at who they've played this year and take a lot of it seriously. I mean, like, Charlotte, UAB, Temple, Bucknell, like they're not playing a lot of great football teams. The one game that was obviously, Memphis is a solid team this year. In that game there was like 110 points scored in that one. So they're going to run the ball well. Obviously, they don't run they throw it a little bit more than I thought they did. It's not like we're all sitting here watching Navy football all the time, but just kind of going through and watching some of the highlights before this game. I was surprised to see how much they actually threw it in this. Apparently, it's Tesca. I don't know how you get T-E-C-Z-A.
Yeah, I don't know how. I had to listen to that yesterday.
Yeah, so he looks like he's a good ball player. So that's definitely the concern is like what Tesca can do against Notre Dame this weekend. If they run the ball, keep the Irish off the field, that's going to be – it's just making things harder because – I would imagine that their goal would be just to limit as many offensive possessions as possible for Notre Dame. And like if you got two teams that are going to run the ball like crazy this weekend, like there's just not going to be a lot of room for error. So that's definitely, what I'm focused on is just what Tesca and the running game can do, for the Midshipmen this weekend.
We're going to be right back with Joe to talk more about Notre Dame's upcoming game against Navy. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you're looking for something to bet on with that first $5 bet, I got one for you today. I am taking the Minnesota Vikings -3 against the Los Angeles Rams tonight on Thursday Night Football. We're on a little bit of a hot streak there, giving out winners for Thursday Night Football and even Monday Night Football as well. We have gone a little bit cold. My last two picks on the show did not work out, so we got to get back in the win column, and I think the Vikings are going to take us there. So take the Minnesota Vikings -3 against the Rams tonight on Thursday Night Football. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com today. How much weight do you put on last year's game and how that played out when Notre Dame smoked them? The final score was 42-3. It wasn't even that close, honestly. Notre Dame could probably have put up more points there at the end if they decided that they wanted to do that. But it's obviously a different Navy team, although there are a lot of the same personnel, but it looks different. They have a different quarterback. They have a different offensive coordinator. The offense is different. Like you mentioned, they pass the ball more than they did. And it's not one of those things where like Navy would always try to get you on like, play action sneak, and then they just kind of throw it downfield and hope that the defense was not expecting that at all so they could still capitalize on a big play. Whereas now it feels like the passing game is actually a function of their offense. So it's a different group in a way, but there's a lot of the same players. Do you think it's going to play out like last year, or do you think that this is just a totally different group and it's going to have a much different outcome on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Like, obviously, like, they have a good quarterback, a new quarterback, and he's pretty solid. It seems like they have the new OC, but they're one of, I think so. I guess it's one of 4 teams in the country that didn't take a transfer portal player this year. It's Army, Navy, Clemson, and Air Force are the only one. I love Clemson just being like this only team that doesn't use the transfer portal. That's why I don't think it's not going to be 42-3. But because it is a lot of the same players, I do think Notre Dame wins this game by 20 plus points. I think that you have to factor in last year and look at the talent disparity. And while Navy is closing the gap, I just don't think they've closed it enough to where as long as Marcus Freeman has the guys ready to play and, they're not overlooking this team, and hopefully that, that number, that top 25 ranking next to their name kind of helps the players a little bit, take them more seriously. It won't happen, but I don't think it's last year, but I don't think it's that much different.
All right, so if you're taking the Irish by 20 plus, what do you think is the biggest reason why they're able to not only win, but win by a significant margin?
It's something you said earlier, like Riley Leonard in the run game. Like, as much as I'd like to see the passing game get going and for him to be the guy that, I don't know, I remember, a couple years ago now, I guess it is, after his first year, being the starting quarterback at Duke, like, you would start to see the way too early mock drafts, and he was the number 1 pick because he actually threw the ball downfield. Like, I don't know what happened to that guy, but it's just his ability to run the ball as a quarterback and do it so effectively. I think that's why. And I think there's just too much talent, and even though there's a lot of injuries on this team, I still think there's a lot of guys on defense that are just going to be a matchup nightmare for Navy, and maybe I'm disrespecting them a little bit and their athleticism, but I think Notre Dame is just going to be more athletic. They're going to be able to run the ball more effectively than Navy, and they're just going to be able to grind it out and hit some big plays here and there to help get them that win. But Leonard is the guy that I just think that his running ability sets them apart for sure.
I know I joked at the beginning of the year that if Notre Dame had just spent the summer in preseason camp running a modern triple option with Riley Leonard, Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love, it would be super effective. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to be facing a real triple option team. And it will be interesting to see how much they run Riley Leonard. They have done it a lot less over the course of the past couple of weeks. I mean, he did have 2 rushing touchdowns against Georgia Tech, but they really saved him for the red zone and then those 3rd and short or 4th and short situations. He's so money on those downs. But yeah, they're going to have to conserve him a little bit. When I was actually watching the 2019 game when Navy was ranked, Notre Dame was 16, Navy was 25th, and that game was over by halftime. Notre Dame was up 38-3. A big reason why they had such a big lead is because Chase Claypool was unstoppable, and Ian Book was hitting him all over the field. So if a receiver were to have a big game in this one, who do you think it's going to be? Is it going to be Bo Collins again because he's kind of led the way the whole year, or do you think Jaden Greathouse finally is a breakout game, or maybe it's someone else?
No, I'd lean Bo to be the guy that just lead them. It is. I know we're all waiting for the really big breakout games to come, but he's just been so consistent and a reliable target for Riley Leonard. I would just imagine that he's the same guy going forward. I don't know how you feel. Like, I want to have greater expectations for the passing game as a whole, and to think that like something's going to click, but kind of feel like we're at the point in the season now where it's just like, this is who you are. Like, this is how you're going to win football games, by, Riley Leonard being effective, trying not to turn the ball over and just running the ball super well. But yeah, I lean Bo to be the main guy this weekend again.
The only thing that I think could drastically change the passing game is if Mitchell Evans returns to form, because he just has not been the person that we saw last year. Like, he was a much different player. He was obviously healthy, and he looked it. He was much more sudden. Guys couldn't cover him, and he was just a contested catch machine. And I liked how they tried to force feed him the ball a little bit against Georgia Tech, and I think that was mostly just to get him into a rhythm, get him comfortable. But right now, he just doesn't look like the same player. I don't know if he suffered a setback or what, because things were looking pretty positive for him in preseason camp. But he played 51 snaps. He had 4 catches for like 26 yards. So if he takes a big step, maybe it comes after this bye week, then I will start to change my opinion about the passing game. But we've talked a lot about the offense. How do you think that this defense is going to fare going up against this triple option?
That's always a great question. Like, I don't know. I mean, the triple option's so weird because they don't run it like they used to. Like, even watching just like some of the highlights back from the Navy Charlotte game, like, they don't run the most traditional triple option even anymore at times. Like, you see their quarterback in shotgun, which is just a strange thing. It seems like, I think Teska's touchdown pass or touchdown reception came from when they were in shotgun this last week. So you need good coaching, because the triple option, like, it seems simple, but like, you just gotta, we all know it. We've seen it for years now. You gotta know your assignments, and you just gotta not make any, big time mistakes, and you should be able to shut it down. I think they have the speed and the athleticism to handle it, but that's all in coaching. That they got to make sure these guys are prepped up, and especially when it's just something that we just don't see it anymore, or very rarely in college football. I know it's harder, to get these guys to really grasp, and some of these kids, they've probably never seen the triple option in their life. No one runs it in high school football anymore. So like some of these guys have never seen it ever. So it's a totally new thing for some of these guys, except for maybe if they were on the team, last year. So I think they'll be okay. But if they're not, I think this is going to be a lot of eyes on the coaching staff and Marcus Freeman for maybe not having his team totally prepped for this one.
Yeah, I see your point there, and I think I feel pretty confident that Navy is going to go right down the field and score a touchdown in the opening drive, because that's what they do. And honestly, that's what happens in most Notre Dame Navy games, even the bad Navy teams. I think it's just like a shock for the defense when they see it live for the first time, and they're like, whoa, this isn't the scout team. This team runs this option every single day in practice. And Navy has scored on the opening drive, I think, in pretty much every game but one this year. So they're going to score on the opening drive. It's just going to be a matter of, can Notre Dame figure it out on the second drive? If they don't, then I'll start to get a little bit worried. But if they come out there on the second drive, make those adjustments, and credit to Algolin, because they have given up points early on this year, but really after that 15-play script is wiped out, then that defense dials in and they figure it out. And I mean, for the most part, this defense has been phenomenal this year.
Oh yeah, they've been fun to watch. It's been the one thing that feels like a constant with Notre Dame in this new era, the post Brian Kelly era of Notre Dame football, is the defense is pretty good. Like, even in the games that they shouldn't have lost, like the defense, it wasn't totally their fault. Usually it's kind of falls back on the offense for what happens. So I feel confident that they're going to win this one. Like I said, win it handily, but you never know. You never know with Notre Dame. They might break our hearts this weekend. I hope not, but
yeah, who knows? I could definitely see it being a competitive game in the second half, but ultimately I do think Notre Dame will run away. Okay, if it's not Navy, what is the other game on the schedule that concerns you the most that could prevent them from going 11-1?
I still look at USC and that offense. I know it's not been as advertised this year, but I still look at them and think, okay, if someone's going to ruin the season for Notre Dame, it's probably USC. They can move the ball pretty effectively when their offense is going, and I know they've had a rude awakening of what Big Ten football is, and that's good for Notre Dame, because they can do a lot of the things that you see Big Ten football teams do. Like, they can run the ball really well, and they can get after the quarterback. So USC is still the one that I kind of have circled of just like, that's the team. It's definitely not Florida State. That's for sure. Definitely not.
I definitely agree with you. And part of me is like, maybe USC will just kind of fold at the end of the year, because, I mean, their win-loss record could be really bad by that point. But there's just been so many times in the past where Notre Dame comes out to Southern California. They play a USC team who's not very good. They don't have a good record, and yet they turn it on for that last game of the season. And, if Notre Dame is 10-1 going into that game, what better way to end the season that's been largely a disappointment than to ruin the season for your rival? So I fully expect them to come out and be ready to go on this one just because they have so many times in the past. But those are all the questions I have for you. Before we let you go, tell the people where they can find you, not only this weekend, but all the other stuff that you're doing as well.
Yeah, so Locked On Chicago is the YouTube channel. We're doing post-game shows, postcasts for the Irish, for the Bears, the Bulls, and eventually for Cubs baseball. So we'll be going live for 30 minutes or so after every single game. So as soon as that final whistle blows against Navy this weekend, we'll go live on Locked On Chicago. We'll be there. The audio will be available on the team channels as well, so you won't have to find somewhere new for that. So it'll be on Locked On Irish that next Monday morning for your guys driving to work. And at Joe George Radio on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok is where you can find me. And yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
All right, man. I'm looking forward to listening to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you have a win to talk about, and then we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Thank you.
Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Personally, I love PrizePicks because I'm able to play out here in California, so it is definitely my favorite. And you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. This is your last call, mailbag tomorrow. Submit your questions below in the YouTube comments, or you can send them in on social media, at Locked On Irish on X, at Locked On Irish Pod on Instagram. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll see you Friday.